right. Think we can go ahead and get started. Hello and welcome everyone to Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. My name is Nina Joshi and I am so excited for our amazing guests for today. We have Priyanka Jain, who is the co-founder and CEO of Evvy, and Heather Hartnett, who is the general partner and CEO of Human Ventures. Before we jump in, just wanted to give a quick background on myself. I work as a consultant and design researcher at Kaiser Permanente's Health Innovation Shop, where I design and deploy digital health products and solutions. And with that, I will bring on our guests, Priyanka and Heather. Welcome you both, and thanks so much for being here today.
Of course, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right. Well, to kick things off, can you both tell us a little bit more about your background and your current role? And maybe Heather, we can start with you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, my name is Heather Hartnett. I run a venture fund and startup studio called Human Ventures here in New York City. We incubate companies and invest all the way up to Series A. And we're very excited and bullish in digital healthcare and the advancements that are happening, and most specifically in women's healthcare, as it's been a very nascent topic for a long time. And we've been fortunate enough in New York to see some incredible founders such as Priyanka come through who are changing the game. So that's a little bit about what we do here at Human.
And then Priyanka?
Amazing. And I'm Priyanka. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Evvy. Evvy is a women's health company specifically focused on bringing new research and data sets into helping us better understand how we can better predict disease in the female body specifically. My background is actually less on the healthcare side and more on the data science and AI side. That's what I did in undergrad at Stanford. And I spent the past 4.5 years building a very different company here in New York called Pymetrics that was centered around building algorithms that were fair and transparent to make the hiring process better for everyone. And we have an incredible founder and CEO there who still leads the company. And I left to take a lot of those principles focused on better data, more fair data. You know, as you can imagine, in the healthcare space, a lot of what we think about as health is based on middle-aged, mid-sized men. So how can we think about health markers as they specifically manifest in the female body? So very excited to be doing that at Evvy with our first focus on the vaginal microbiome.
That's incredible. And so now also wanted to ask, as CEOs of your respective companies, and I know Priyanka, you touched on this a little bit, but would love to kind of have you expand more, maybe to start about your journey that kind of led you specifically to Evvy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I'd always been really interested in ways that data and algorithms and technology could improve life for people, right? I think I was at Stanford at a time when it felt like everyone was, coming up with the next Yo app and, an Alexa powered toilet that you could flush with your voice. And I just remember always thinking, we have all of these amazing technologies. Why are we using them to solve what seemed like really important pressing challenges in the world? And I had met Frida Pauly, who's the amazing founder and CEO of Pymetrics, who was the first person I had met who said, we can actually use a lot of this technology to improve something that really mattered to me, which was creating more fairness in the hiring process, helping more women get their dream jobs. And it was amazing to kind of see the ways that, if you are intentional about data and about technology creation, you really can introduce it to change outcomes at scale, right? And now Pymetrics works with some of the largest companies in the world to transform the way that they think about people, right? Where instead of basing it on what someone's had access to in the past, where they went to school, what their job titles were, instead thinking about what someone's capable of, right? And, having schools go from, or companies, only hire from the top 10 schools in the country to actually hiring record numbers of community college students, right? And people who ended up staying longer and performing better. And I think seeing that innovation and seeing how, when you bring out thoughtfully designed, ethically designed algorithms into really regulated spaces, you can actually really change outcomes. During COVID, I think all any of us could think about was healthcare. And, I think
sounds about right.
I think every woman, as I always say, has her own version of the story of feeling misdiagnosed, underdiagnosed, misunderstood at the doctor's office. I think I personally had been told to drink more water one too many times. And was really curious, why are we not thinking about using better data to help me make better decisions about my health? And I actually have two brothers, and it always made me so mad that we were looking at the same markers of health across all of us. I was like, my body works fundamentally different than both of yours, right? And I always think about the fact that, when you get your blood drawn at the doctor's office, it's not like it's sitting on the counter being like, ask me about my vitamin D and my cholesterol, right? We decided that those were the critical markers of health. And I was so curious about what markers of health are sitting in the female body that we've never actually looked at before, because we never studied women, right? And I think my kind of aha moment was realizing that women weren't required to be in clinical research in the US until 1993. Right.
Oh,
so
wow. Oh, wow.
We don't know about the female body. And Evvy really exists to help give women better information and insights into what's going on in their own bodies, while building up the research to really change the standard of care overall.
That's amazing. That's incredible. And then Heather, I want to turn also over to you, kind of being the CEO and general partner and kind of watching so many of these ideas or startups kind of really blossom. Would love to learn a little bit more about your journey to kind of becoming the general partner at Human Venture.
Yeah, I love hearing Priyanka's story because it really is a quintessential highlight of the types of founders that we based Human Ventures on, right? So we saw a need in the market. We started Human about 6 years ago, and specifically in New York City, there were a lot of funds that were investing in the tech frontier. There were not a lot of funds who were thinking about the next human frontier. It's how is tech now in service of the human experience versus technology dictating how we're acting. And I think that's what we're seeing, and COVID completely accelerated that. So our job is to not only pick the spaces that we think are going to be massive opportunities in the next 10 years, but also pick the right types of founders who are understanding those problems. So the founder of today looks very different than the founder of 15, 20 years ago. And the challenges that those founders are facing are very different, and the cultures that you have to build now, the understanding of how you're building in this new environment. So human really is an all-encompassing, our categories we call the human needs economy. Obviously, health and wellness is a very big part of that. Also, the future of work as it pertains to humans. So worker well-being, lifelong learning, how you're understanding your career path. And these are all areas that you really have to look and see what types of founders understand where the world is going and building towards that. We say founders of the future see through the matrix. And when I met Priyanka, it was completely obvious that is what you could see her energy and enthusiasm. And a lot of the companies that we're looking at right now, founders have to be 10 years in the future, right? And the women's healthcare space is so nascent in terms of funding. I mean, I pulled some stats. I think only 3% of almost 3,000 digital health deals since 2011 have been focused on women's health. That is unbelievable. Wow. And people still call it niche. And I said, well, 51% of the population is not niche anymore. We're going through these issues. I think, as investors now who have the ability to fund these companies and have the same problems, we go through these life stages, and we're starting to see the opportunity there. So whether it's understanding fertility from a younger age, understanding what your options are, prenatal, postnatal, postpartum, through perimenopause and menopause, just has not been talked enough about, and also now these solutions. So my journey has been always to kind of predict I came from a long line of entrepreneurs. My father was an entrepreneur. My grandfather was. When I started my career, my father said, what company are you going to start? I didn't know what I was going to do. Luckily, I kind of stumbled into this category of venture where I could meet incredible founders and say, can I be a catalyst for giving you the resources to be able to build these, build the change.
That's amazing. And really like how you kind of have to play that role and really help kind of guide what the next round of innovation that's going to be. And I love that you're saying that it has to be human focused, not tech focused. I think that is amazing. And so now kind of wanted to ask you, since I know you both have like this really incredible relationship, this friendship, and I think it's so fun that it's kind of two sides of the startup coin as founder and as investor. How has kind of your relationship really impacted your respective careers?
I mean, I owe so many things to Heather. I actually Heather is one of the first people that I met in my decision to move to New York. I was always in the Bay Area and thought, oh, if you want to build a tech company, this is where you have to be. And I remember meeting Heather, and, it was very early days of Human. I think you guys had just launched. This was now what, 6 or 7 years ago, maybe. And I remember thinking like, wow, I really, really admire this way of thinking, right? Where it's not, who was the last kid who graduated from Stanford with an idea. Instead, it was way more about like, is this really something that's going to impact humanity? And is this person someone who really cares about solving it? And this very just different way of thinking. And I was like, I want to work in that ecosystem, right? So I ended up moving to New York, and Heather and I kept in very close touch. Always were talking about, she's been so forward thinking in the future of workspace, which is obviously where I was at Pymetrics, and we got to collaborate on just a lot of thinking about how can we actually shift access to opportunity, and how can we build a workforce that actually works for people, right? And then as I was, thinking about how I could apply some of those principles to healthcare, I mean, Heather was my first call yet again. But I still remember, like, I don't even know, well over a year ago now, when I was playing around with like 10 different ideas. And, as a founder, I think something that I am so grateful for in her, and I strongly, would recommend to anyone else to think about is, who is the person that when you call isn't telling you what to do, but helping you figure out what you actually think. And I think Heather's always been so thoughtful about asking the right questions and really pushing me to actually build conviction in something. And I think that was really a really hard part of the process for me. I think people always talk about ideation and all of that being so fun. And it was actually, as someone who really likes to do things, it was really hard when I was trying to decide what to do. And I think having someone like Heather who could really help me understand what I really believed in and where I had conviction allowed me to really, thrive in that versus feeling like I had to look to someone else to have the answer. So I think having strong mentors, I think everyone always says is important, but I think especially when you're trying to build something from scratch and you're trying to do it alone. It was before my co-founder joined. People like Heather, change everything.
Well, that is very kind of you to say. And I think that mentorship goes both ways. And I have learned so much from Priyanka. I think the change happens in venture when the founders who are very sought after and super talented have the decision to take money from who, capital is a commodity. So who are you actually taking money from is a really big question that founders don't necessarily always ask themselves, because you're always trying to, get to the next level but you really have to make sure that investor founder fit works because it's a long-term partnership. It is beyond a friendship, beyond it's a marriage, even a financial kind of partnership for a long term and building a company. When I met Priyanka, I was so impressed with her, and I have kind of this, people call that deal flow. I always say it's people flow. It's who are the founder flow? Who are the people that you're keeping an eye on because that they're going to do huge things in the world. And I can quite confidently say that Priyanka's been at the top of my list. I've been trying to give her money for a long time. But what I really admired about her as well was she really took the leap to join an early startup and got operational expertise in a way that was so thoughtful and gained conviction in her own ability to start a company. So, she was very well pedigreed and could have taken money earlier. And she really did her time to figure out how she wanted to build her company, and then thought through the problem really thoughtfully and did a lot of that. So I've been watching for a long time, and wherever I could be helpful, I've been trying to connect with her. And then, she was kind enough to allow me to invest in her company. And I hope that, this is the first of many. And I think those are the relationships. Like, this is a long game, especially early stage venture.
I always have to remind myself, I'm like, my career has another 50 years in it, so I can't burn myself out now.
Well, and I tell people it's a long life. And in venture, I think people start early and they don't realize how long of a life it is. And here I've been in venture for over a decade, and I still feel new to it. And people who we first met, and it just comes back around. You think it's just this finite thing. They're at this one firm forever. They're not. They're going to change to different firms. They're going to do, so it's all about the people and the connection that you have.
That's incredible. Yeah, very, very true. That sounds like a very really like interesting thing to be, especially I would imagine too, like in the past few years, the world of venture and even the startup world when it comes to founders have changed so much. To kind of be able to be a part of it and to kind of see it evolve must be really interesting. So now I kind of wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk about kind of a bit more about the companies and the products. So I know Priyanka, you do, your product is kind of like an at-home test model. And I know Heather, you have invested in a couple of at-home testing platforms. So when it kind of comes to this type of modality, what are some of the barriers that you are hoping to break with this type of delivery when it comes to at-home testing, from either an access, quality, even convenience perspective?
Totally. I mean,
Priyanka, do you want to start?
talk about it at the macro level, and then I can talk about it at my level.
Sure. No, why don't you start first with Evvy? I really think that your solution is where we should start.
I think at-home testing solves many problems. I think, more than anything, to me, at-home testing is not a business. At-home testing is a way in which you reach your customers, right? In the same way that like online is a way you meet your customers. At-home testing is just a modality. To me, that's not the business itself. And I don't really think about Evvy as a testing company. I think about Evvy as a research company, right? How do we actually help women better understand their own bodies, be the citizen scientists for their own bodies? And how do we actually do the research at scale that changes the standard of care, right? Yeah. And to me, at-home testing is just a way in which you can reach people. I mean, the benefits of it are manifold, right? I think obviously COVID really accelerated so much of that. Now, when you send someone an at-home test kit, they understand the idea of activating it and following the instructions and sending it back, which is great, right? Because now people are more comfortable. And what that enables, obviously, is access from the standpoint of like, even just not everyone has time to go to the doctor, right? People work different hours of jobs, and a lot of people work the same hours that doctors work, right? So being able to actually access, better understanding of your body on your time is really nice. I also think, it enables people to do remote monitoring on their own, right? Again, not having to go into a clinic, actually be able to follow up on their own time when it makes sense. For us, some people really want to test when they specifically have symptoms, and it's really hard to time your doctor's appointment with when your vagina might feel itchy. So it's nice to, have it at home and be able to use it when it actually makes sense for you. You're actually able to lower a lot of costs by doing that, right? And by actually shipping things to people in their home. And hopefully over time, you can make sure that all of these things are fully accessible to anyone, anywhere. And to me, the idea of, we have so many of our members are people who are in parts of the country that don't have, women's specific healthcare in any way, right? And the fact that we're able to get to those people because of being at home is really exciting to us.
So I'll touch on a couple of areas that we're seeing are trends in healthcare. Obviously, COVID sped up a lot. Telehealth medicine is a big, it's a big kind of buzz phrase. I don't think that telehealth is a category in and of itself. It is an access point to now better creating individualized healthcare and seeing what people want. And then we're going to start to see that integrate into our brick and mortar healthcare system as well. What I love about digital healthcare right now is that it's just pushing the healthcare industry to focus on areas that just weren't covered under standard of care. So some, healthcare professionals might have, a couple of courses in med school on menopause, but they don't actually know all of the areas that are cutting edge, and nor should they, the general practitioners. So how are we diving into some of those areas in a more specific verticalized way? And what are the offerings that the community actually wants? And so I think that the startups that are in some of these spaces right now are able to identify problems and challenges and solutions, and then that will end up becoming more of a standard of care for women in general. And it's not just women, right? It's individualized communities too. So what we're seeing is verticalized healthcare for people of color, for minority communities, for people who otherwise never ever have even gone to the doctor, or they don't know. You can have technology to predict predisposition to hypertension or diabetes, and the internet just gives us access to be able to do that. And then it opens up a whole nother, slew of problems where you're saying, what are the regulation challenges, and how is technology now? What are the pipings? Much like fintech, we're seeing regulations, kind of barriers busted over the last 10 years of banking and transfer of money. We're seeing that now with healthcare. How are you thinking about HIPAA compliance and cross-border doctors and practitioners? So we're looking at point solutions for across all of those. And then I'll say that there are companies like we invested early in a company called Tia Healthcare. They are, it's an in-person clinic for women's health. Right. And now they're partnering with incredible companies. I think they're partnering with, I don't want to announce anything I'm not supposed to, but maybe you can talk about that, Priyanka. But with all these other healthcare companies that are coming up, and they're going to be a platform for a lot of solutions and a way for people to discover those specialized care. So that's kind of an overview on. We look to where the founders are building to know what the next big areas are, and because we're really early, we get to see where things are percolating, and then start funding them to see what really the consumer is looking for.
Yeah, and go for it, Priyanka.
I was gonna say one thing to build on that too. I think not everything can or should be done online. I think that, instead of saying, how do we take the existing healthcare experience and put it online, we should be thinking given the technology that we have, what is the best experience that we can create for a patient, right? And sometimes that means doing it at home. Sometimes that means doing it via telehealth. Sometimes it might mean a nurse or a doctor coming to you. Sometimes it might mean you going somewhere else, right? But instead it's saying, what are all the tools in our toolkit, and how do we create the best possible experience that improves outcomes as much as we possibly can, versus just saying put things online. And I think that alone is not a business.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way of putting it, really about kind of what do we have to our use, and then what's going to actually solve the problem. 100%. And it's talk about great segue. So we actually have a question from the audience that I think is really applicable to, I think, especially Heather, what you were talking about all of the different kind of components that are kind of at play as we start to think about an increasingly digital world. So this is the question from the audience. I was wondering how health tech and supply chain can work together to transform tier 2 and 3 cities. I was really amazed to find out how diagnosis or labs in cities can help nearby urban areas. And with AI, machine learning, we can lower delivery costs, make it fast, and many other things. But what is it in the long term? Is a company doing things how would that be profitable in a long term? And what are some other use cases for things like the integration between supply chain and health tech? I'll let Priyanka, Heather, anyone want to kick us off on that?
I mean, I can share a few thoughts. I think supply chain is a really important part of healthcare. It always has been, right? If you think about, there's so many materials that were necessary at a doctor's office, and there was a lot of predicting that had to go on. And I'm sure there are a lot of businesses that exist and that help, clinics already think about, what do I need for who and when. And I think it's really interesting when the clinic, getting materials to the clinic is now actually people's homes, right? And if you think about what are the materials that everyone needs in their home to have the best healthcare, that's a whole different challenge from a supply chain perspective. And I'm by no means an expert on supply chain. We have, a very small supply chain for our product right now. But I can tell you it's really hard, and it's really hard to manage all the different pieces that come together to create even just our single experience. And I definitely think, as someone who recently had to, do a lot of partnerships and deals to make our supply chain happen, there's a lot of room for improvement and innovation. And I've definitely seen a few companies. One of them is called Ash, that does helps with optimizing supply chain for you, especially as it relates to at-home testing. And I'm excited for more innovation there, because I think, to our points earlier, parts of the clinic are getting distributed. And as that happens, all of the supplies that were necessary are also distributed, and that will create a new set of challenges that I don't think we've solved yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ash is great. And then Heather, anything you want to add to that?
Not on the supply chain side. I do think we're starting to see, like Priyanka was saying, the aggregation of some of the clinics add on, right? So CVS can have a component, and so people can have more, easier access, but at a lower cost to starting an entire healthcare facility yourself. And I think that'll help cut down on the it's still difficult for users at home, customers at home, to do self-administered tests and always have, struggle. You can talk about that too, Priyanka, but efficacy there. So I think it'll be working together, where how do you create more access in rural areas without having to have a centralized location. And same goes for testing, right? So testing facilities and how you can decentralize that a little bit more too, so that you can have faster results and more accuracy.
Incredible. So then I know we're 3 minutes out, but I just have to ask one last question. This is such an incredible conversation. For you both, and Heather, you touched on this a little bit, but based off of your past experiences and kind of current understanding of our world, especially, our world in the midst of COVID, what is the direction that you are kind of seeing, or you would like to see women's health kind of move forward in? And not just thinking about it from a product perspective, but also, Priyanka, you touched a lot about the research and a lot of the changes or steps that need to be taken kind of on that front as well. So kind of what is your wish list? What are you really hoping to see to kind of really move things forward?
Yeah, I mean, I can give a first answer to that. I think, my advice on this front to anyone who's thinking about it is, I remember always hearing like, well, if it's a good idea, it would have already been done. And I think that this is a perfect area where that is just not true, right? There have not been the resources, there's not been the research, and it is prime time to say, like, if you are a person whose experience hasn't been paid attention to, that doesn't mean that it's not a problem to be solved. And I think, obviously we're focused on vaginal health, and that's so obvious, right? Like, vaginal infections are the most common infection in women after the common cold. They're the number one reason people go to the OBGYN. Mm-hmm. And they have all of these outsized effects on our long-term health, things like our fertility, preterm birth, cervical cancer progression, STI acquisition. And yet that's just not part of the healthcare system today, right? Women today, most of them would tell you that the status quo as it relates to vaginal infections is not working for them, right? It has one of the highest recurrence rates in medicine. And that's not to say that that's not a problem to be solved, right? Because it hasn't been done yet. And I would say that where women's health tech is going, as Heather said, is really paying attention to people's experiences and where are the things that are broken for people, and how do we take all of the people who have been left out of the system, which is essentially anyone who is not a middle-aged, mid-sized man, and think about how we can improve the healthcare system for those people. And I would just encourage people to not ignore their own experiences, because it's likely that if you've experienced it, so have other people. And the time is now to fix that.
That is beautiful.
I know that's so inclusive, and we're at the end here. I want to just end with that. I will add just that I think the conversation is so important to keep having and not shy away from. There's a lot that women experience that it's just not talked about. So the media participating in that, even saying vaginal health care and vaginal microbiome at dinner conversations that we're having around investing tables, and it makes everybody feel uncomfortable, and it shouldn't. Why? We talk about erectile dysfunction all the time. We see it everywhere. I mean, one of my favorite stats that Evvy says is 5 times the amount of research goes into ED, erectile dysfunction, which only affects 19% of men, than for premenstrual syndrome, which affects 90% of women. So, I mean, it's those things are staggering. So the stats, just uncovering the stats and how we can really think about that in terms of creating the conversation. And, it just shifts the mindset that fertility is not only, a problem with women, it's actually 40 to 50% of the time it's a problem stemming from the man, and just don't think about that. And so I think, or people in general, even women. So, so education, I think education is a big part of how these companies can help shift the narrative.
Yes. Absolutely. And so with that, I think, I could have just kept on talking. So we definitely at some point need to have a part 2 of this conversation. But thank you both so much for such an interesting conversation. Really, really a pleasure. And then kind of some of events that we have on October 6th, we have our next Women's Health Tech Wednesdays with Julia Peeve. So please be sure to check that out next week. And we also are starting our Women's Health Tech Challenge. So applications for that is opening up by the end of next week. So if you are, by the end of this week. So if you're interested, please go ahead and click on that link below for more information. And to stay in touch with HIT Lab, here are our social channels so that you can be up to date on all of the events that we have. And really just wanted to give one last shout out to both Heather and to Priyanka. Their LinkedIns are in the chat. So if you do want to reach out, that's all of that information. Thank you both so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Nina. Wonderful to talk with you. Thanks, Priyanka.
Absolutely. And also thank you to our sponsor, Goodwin, for this amazing conversation. And with that, I will see everyone next week. And thanks again, Priyanka and Heather.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks. Bye, everyone.